Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our AFT STAAR panel. We want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. We know it's very cold, which is unexpected here in Texas. I want to acknowledge that this is a happy hour panel. So those of you who are being educated as you're getting happy, salute to you. I want to thank all of the members of our panel. We have Representative Van Deaver is here. We have Dr. Teresa Trevino from TAMSA. We have Dr. Walter Stroup, pardon my bumbling that, from UMass. And shortly, Representative Alma Allen will be joining us. So while we wait for her to join, we will get started. And I would just like to ask the members of our panel to just briefly introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what brings you here tonight. Why don't we start with Representative Van Deaver? Would you start, please?
Sure. Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited to have this discussion. I think that this will be a very robust discussion and one that hopefully we can certainly present some of the issues that we see and possibly get upon a solution or two. My background, I am a former teacher, principal, superintendent, a 33-year career in education. I'm currently serving in my 4th term in the Texas House, and I've been on the same committees all 4 terms of my service. I've been on Public Education Committee and the Appropriations Committee, Article 3 of Appropriations. And so I feel like I'm just exactly where I need to be, and hopefully we can do some good things.
Stars aligned, aren't they? Thank you. Okay. Dr. Stroup, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I started off as a teacher of middle school and high school science and mathematics. It's been a few years. I think I started in 1984 for about 10 years. I joke with teachers that I work with about I've lost my street cred as a teacher, right? If you're out of the classroom, they said 2 years, you're no longer a teacher. So you don't count anymore.
We'll keep you in the fold.
And since for a while I've been a professor, but in between I was actually worked for Bob Moses' algebra proctor in City, Boston, relative to the For All initiative. And so that actually kind of nudged me towards the university setting of how do we bring about the kind of reform and access to mathematics and other areas for all children. And so I think that's what motivates my interest in assessment. I live in Austin. My kids graduated from AISD, and I've been pretty involved in issues around assessment for quite a while now.
All right, Dr. Trevino.
Sure. So I am actually a physician with a specialty in child and adolescent psychiatry. And part of our training involved advocating for students and for children, both at the school level and regarding at the level of, say, Texas Department of Protective and Regulatory Services. So there's a lot of overlap there. And in addition to also being a mom of 2 young children at the time, I started noticing that in my practice, beginning about January, I started to get a lot of referrals for students needing medication. And these were young students, ages 5, 6, 7, 8, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm a pretty conservative child psychiatrist. I don't believe in medicating everybody. So I started to wonder what was going on and attending more ARD meetings, and that there was this test. So fast forward a few years, and my children are in the middle of this, and we became involved, or I became involved as part of a larger parent group of moms. We were also known as Mothers Against Drunk Testing. Back when old House Bill 3 passed back in 2011, the tax regime to the STAAR regime. And so we kind of banded together and we're organized and we all have our strengths in different areas and decided, well, what can we do to change 15 EOCs required to graduate from high school? And someone said, well, we can just go to the Capitol. Okay, let's go. So we did. And we've always been a grassroots organization. We're kind of out of PTA. All of us have been involved in PTA, but also have been advocating for not no testing or assessment, but just an assessment that would better be more meaningful and meet the needs of our students and help our students progress onto the next level.
Thank you so much for that. Hello, Representative Allen. Welcome. We're glad you made it. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Hi. Can you tell?
I'm making it. I'm going in and out.
Great.
I'm still going
Glad
in and
to have
out,
you
but I'm
joining us.
here
Thank
now.
you so much. Would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little
Thank
bit
you.
about yourself, please, and how you came to join us this evening?
Oh, okay. A little bit about me. All right. Okay. This is my 17th year in the legislature. Prior to being in the legislature, of course, you know, I was in education as a teacher for 14 years, a assistant principal for 1 and principal for 16. And then after leaving the principalship, I went to central office in personnel, hiring administrators for the Houston Independent School District. By the way, I've only worked for one district, worked there for 39.
Yep.
I think we lost Representative Allen one more time, but when she comes back on, we will pull her in. Thank you all. So let's get started with our first question while we wait for Dr. Allen to reconnect. In Texas, we've reached more than 2.1 million cases of COVID-19. Yes, you're back in, Dr. Allen.
Oh my goodness. Where did I stop? Where did I stop? What was
you stopped off telling us
that
you had been in one district for the entirety of your career. Fantastic, which is amazing.
Yeah, I only worked for the Houston Independent School District, retired in 2000 and went to Purdue as an adjunct professor, stayed there 5 years. And of course, I've done some other works at the University of Houston and TSU. And basically, that is the short of my career. So now I've been here and I've been on the education committee now, I think 4 sessions. So that's the short of it. That's me.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So we're going to jump into our first question, which is our first topic, which is in Texas, we reached more than 2.1 million cases of COVID-19 and 34,000 Texans have died from COVID-19, including some teachers and educators. Last year, Governor Abbott asked the federal government for a waiver of the 2019-2020 STAAR test. However, as of now, Texas children who are learning in person apparently will be expected to take the STAAR test this spring. So my question to our panelists is, what do you think about the commissioner's decision not to seek a waiver of federal testing requirements? And I'd like to, Dr. Trevino, if you would start with that, I'd appreciate your commentary on that.
Okay. Well, we were disappointed and hopeful that if there was a federal waiver available, that our commissioner would file for one. We understand that even more probably than last year, the 2019-2020 school year, this has been an extremely unusual year for our students. Every student is having a different learning experience, and it's a diverse state. So some students have gone back to school, back into their brick and mortar classrooms. Others have not. Others have been lost to the system, and that's of concern, a whole other issue. But since we don't have our students learning in their usual way that they're used to, we find it, I don't know how to word this, but this would seem it seems like almost too much to ask for students to come in and take a test especially since this year has been so different. The other thing is the commissioner made numerous references to the fact that students are not liable to get sick from the coronavirus, and that is true. However, even if they are infected with the virus and don't have symptoms, they are carriers. And it's important to note that even within our school districts, we have had the UK variant reported. And I'm not trying to be the alarmist here, but I wouldn't be surprised if the South African variant didn't rear its ugly head in Texas here very soon. The cases are starting to creep up, and we know how this virus acts. So for the safety of our students and our teachers and our staff members, I think it would be wise to apply for a waiver. I realize that we've removed the states from accountability, but I would encourage parents and families to make a decision and to be very personal about it. And if they don't think that their children should go in and take the test, then they should not take the test. Even those that are in school right now and that are attending their brick and mortar classrooms. Some might say, well, they're already there. Why not go ahead and test them? The issue with that is you're going to still receive a limited amount of data. And I'm not still entirely sure what that data is going to be used for and how different it would be as opposed to the data that our teachers already have on students that they see every day, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in the classroom.
Thank you. Representative Van Deaver, I'd like you to put on your former superintendent hat, if you would. And from that perspective, how would you approach or even offer guidance to superintendents now, or even to the TEA commissioner at this point about seeking a waiver for the test, for the STAAR test?
Yeah, I agree. I disappointed that we did not seek a waiver. I think we have every reason in the world to seek the waiver. If I were sitting in the superintendent's chair today, I would be very concerned. I have advocated for an assessment being given to measure academic progress and collect data on where our students are. I'm convinced the STAAR is not that instrument to properly do that. But now that to me, it's even more problematic from a data perspective that we are not going to test the virtual learners and we are going to test the in-person learners, because to me, the most valuable data we could have collected would have been a comparison of the virtual versus the in-person, because I'm convinced that there is no substitute for being in a classroom with a teacher in most cases where that is appropriate. And so I fear, I'm concerned that we will, because we are now putting in place all of these virtual options, that there's going to be a push to move our school to a virtual platform long term, and I think that's unhealthy for our students' education. And to again, I agree with what Dr. Reno said. I normally agree with everything she says, by the way. And so there's usually not much of a problem there. But I think the fact that we're going to be collecting some data and yet not a robust set of data, that's worse than no data in many instances, I think. I would prefer to have, as a school superintendent, I would prefer to just use my own data in my district rather than have a partial collection of data statewide, because I think partial data leads to inaccurate assumptions in that data set. So yes, and by the way, I will say this: I am thankful I'm not still sitting in a superintendent's chair right now, because that is not a fun place to be.
Dr. Stroup, did you have any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree that I'm glad that I'm not a superintendent right now. So I don't think they would hire me, but I'm glad, they clearly hired you, but I don't think they'd ever hire me. No, I want to follow up on some of this idea of we want data about kids. I think all the educators I work with support accountability. I think Teresa talking about wanting meaningful assessments. I think we need to get there. My fear is with the COVID is there somehow, both in Washington and in Texas, a belief that these tests could do something they weren't able to do beforehand. They were never designed to be diagnostic. They are a high stakes measure. They're designed to generate a scale score. That scale score is difficult to interpret. I would ask you, how many educators do you know can tell you how the scale score gets generated? But that's what a STAAR test does, is generates a scale score. The idea that it's suddenly able to do diagnostic functions is just not true. The second thing is there's some issues about validity. We can talk about that later, but in terms of reliability, it tells you something when NWEA's CEO says you can't use our tests for high stakes purposes because the reliability has been affected. It tells you something when the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP, pulls its tests for this year because reliability is so badly affected. So what you said, Gary, as a superintendent, this data isn't data that can tell you something as a superintendent. People will burn up a lot of time trying to interpret information that's not good. And when we talk about reliability, it's not just for high stakes purposes. I always compare it to a bike that has a flat tire. If you wanted to go on a long trip, then you probably aren't going on a long trip. But you're also not going on a trip around the block, because reliability is reliability. And if you're throwing off the reliability, it's not reliable for any purpose. And so you're dragging schools through this kind of dance that Teresa talked about in terms of having people come to campus and so forth, or not come to campus. And at the end of the day, there's no reason to believe the data will be able to tell you anything. And it's being sold as if it's going to be suddenly diagnostic and suddenly tell you something about some kids. No, it's just not reliable. Not reliable is not reliable. That's why two big entities have pulled their tests.
So I'm wondering if we should even back up just a little bit and explain, what STAAR is and even what a standardized test is for our audience, because I do think when I talk to other educators, when I talk to parents, they're not fully sure what a STAAR is and what a standardized test is. And Dr. Stroup, I know you've talked about this a little bit.
I don't know.
Sort of up to this question. Can you tell us a little bit, would you enlighten us a little bit on that?
Oh, what is STAAR? The idea is that it was supposed to be tied to the original No Child Left Behind goals, right? That we would have assessments that would be able to hold the system accountable for both improving everybody's outcome, but also closing gaps. So it was originally envisioned as part of the move in that kind of direction to tie federal funding to outcomes for kids on tests. And as somebody that worked in inner city Boston, it's not okay if high school seniors are learning decimal multiplication. And so the No Child Left Behind, I always remind people that it was George W. Bush, and Ted Kennedy. So we had what was at the time the right and the left agreeing these were goals that would move us forward. My sense of why that has failed is we put too much weight on these tests. The particular design of these tests was meant to do X, Y, and Z, and it has not done any of those things. And so the hope was we'd have tests that would give us information that would allow us to improve schools. I'm a supporter of the goals of No Child Left Behind. I'm in part was recruited to Texas because of that background in Boston. And so I am frustrated by the fact that we have tests that actually are not very sensitive to what teachers do. They're very good at sorting kids in the same order year after year. So they don't measure what we're supposed to be measuring, and they sort kids in a kind of way that actually reinforces the inequality. So what I would say to parents is that they were launched with the best of intentions. But if you talk to educators in the classroom about how much information they get from these tests that they can actually act on, it's not very much. Or if I say to parents, when you get that little report and it says your child is a 4150, how do you interpret a scale score like 4150? So for $388 million, we're generating a scale score that no one can interpret and is particularly not useful in a time of COVID. So I don't know if I was totally fair to it, but there was a hope that this test would measure content outcomes. And it turns out the tests are not very sensitive to content outcomes. And so they're not capable of doing what they were intended to do.
Thank you for that. So, Representative Allen.
You made me do that.
I owe you.
I saw it coming. I was like, oh, I hope Dr. Allen gets this one. Yeah. Sorry.
She gets the next one.
Okay.
So we know that students do not have the same amount of access to resources, including Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi, as some of my students call it, broadband devices, and parent supports and other supports. And historically, students with more access to these resources tend to perform better on standardized tests. So, Dr. Allen, I want to hear from you on this. Can we equitably judge students considering these resource gaps? Or can we judge the assessment, considering these resource gaps? What are your thoughts on that? Oh, you're unmute yourself, Dr. Allen.
The answer to that one is no. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Plain and simple. Yes, ma'am.
A model of efficiency.
Yeah, the answer is a plain simple no. They've not all been taught at the same level or the same method, and some have Wi-Fi, some don't. Some got it early, some got it late, and some didn't have anyone at home to help them get through the instructions. They didn't know how to do it, and certainly those kids who are in the lower grades don't learn well from machines as well as those in the upper grades. Then there's no one there to monitor to see if they were on the machines at the same time, whatever. In other words, no. Let me really just kind of tap on that STAAR test. The STAAR test, he said he did a good job of telling you what the STAAR test was about. But the STAAR test was, it came out of No Child Left Behind. It really did. But when they designed the STAAR test, and I was on the State Board of Education when they did that, when they designed the STAAR test, every state designs its own test. So we don't have equal across the United States either. Texas designed its own STAAR test. And when they did, even I took the test when they brought it out. Even I couldn't pass it. So it doesn't measure what they think it's going to measure. And I certainly don't believe it ought to be used for high stakes. Retaining kids, holding kids back, keeping them being promoted, keeping them from graduating. It certainly ought to not be used for that. And the other thing I want to say about the STAAR test is we all know what it's going to say. You and I as educators know what it's going to say. It's going to say that the kids lost a lot. We know that without even taking a test, that a lot of learning has not taken place during this period of time. So it's really a waste of money. We should not be asking our parents to expose our kids to in school tests if they've not been taught in school. That is unfair. So no, I don't see this as a great thing to do, and I'm hoping that the governor will ask for a waiver on this too.
So what can or should the legislature do at this point then to address that accountability? Say that again.
No, I just asked, did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, you did. Thank you so much. So my next question was going to be, what can should the legislature do at this point to address accountability and assessments beyond standardized testing? We know that federal law does require some kind of test. We know that at ESSA has opened up some options. So are there better options for getting the assessment data that we need?
Yes. If you don't mind, I'll jump in.
Please.
ESSA, yes, requires that we test the children once a year, every grade. We all know 3 through 8, it's reading and math, and in high school, somewhere along the way, usually by about 10th grade, in English, science, math. So we know that's what we need to meet, or we need to do in order to get the federal dollars to fund our Title I schooling and other things that we use federal monies for. And they're not insignificant. We know that. But what is something we could do right now? Make high stakes go away, just like Representative Allen said. And I would ask both of you, Dr. Allen and also Representative Van Deaver, please submit a bill that would remove high stakes from the students, remove it from grade promotion and from graduation. If you only just gave the one test, it would be one assessment out of many of students of their education that could be used to help inform and to help students move on to the next level. And that's really what we all want. We all want for our children and the workforce and so forth coming up to be prepared for college. And I would argue that keeping high stakes on, and in particular right now, with the pandemic, we still have high stakes on the high school students. We've removed it from grades 3 through 8. We've removed it from the accountability system, but we have kept it on the high school students. That in and of itself narrows their curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So the student, and I get calls from so many parents across the state that have children that struggle, and they're not even taking the test 1, 2, or 3 times. Some of them are taking it up to 9 times and are kept from other classes. They're subjected to the TSI, or not TSI, SSI. But there's all this that gets around trying to, get the student to pass the STAAR test so that they can graduate. But 93% graduation rate is not correlating to the 20% of students that actually get a 2-year, 4-year, or 2-year certificate 6 years after graduation from high school. So simple. This session, let's just make high stakes no stakes. Just remove it. That's simple. And that would be my suggestion to do for now and moving forward. And, from our standpoint, from the pandemic perspective, we would continue to push the governor and ask the legislators to help us in asking the governor to request another waiver for this year until we can get back on our feet.
So I did.
Can I follow on that? Or
Yeah. I filed the bill for no high stakes. I did that already. Where it would go, I don't know.
I guess what I would add to what Teresa's saying is, if we really want diagnostic tests, if we want to know how our kids are doing, instead of having a top-down testing system where you run through a psychometric model and the people that are on the technical advisory committees have PhDs in psychometrics, if you really want to know about kids, I think we need to start funding the possibility of a bottom-up model of developing assessment. So who knows the most about third graders learning fractions? Probably third
teachers,
right? Who knows the most about trying to get across aspects of, the Civil War in the middle school history teacher. So I think we need to try and pilot a bottom-up approach, take the psychometric layer out and stop doing item response theory and all these other things that give us tests that don't measure what they're supposed to, and work with teachers on, they can write items for themselves for their use in their own classrooms. If they write pretty good ones, maybe they'll use them in the school. Maybe if they're even better ones, they go in the district, and then maybe you can have a statewide system. But then accountability is one set of educators holding themselves accountable. Instead of running through the filter of high-stakes testing systems and all these vendors that want to sell different kinds of things, what if you did a bottom-up model? And then you can actually apply for a waiver at a federal, not just this year, but down the road, to say, hey, we've got an accountability system that works for us, that is grassroots and growing up from what Texas teachers know about their kids. And I think we can do that. I think there's models for that. We've been working in 4 states on teachers developing items that meet certain specifications so that they can be useful to each other, right? Sometimes I write questions as a teacher, they're not so good, but sometimes I write a good one and I want to build up that way based on what teachers know. So we need a bottom-up model for developing assessments and accountability.
So would a district formal assessment or district level assessment, would that count towards that? Would that sort of be considered a bottom-up because they are?
That I think there's some, the way we design items is sort of caught in the existing kind of psychometric worlds of only one right answer. So you got 4 choices, you only choose one. There are other ways of designing items that sort of say, hey, if we're getting rid of that model, we can come up with models where there's much more information. So choosing more than one correct answer where it's not scored in an exact match, all that geeky stuff. You can have like 8 times as much information in a test. It can be shorter. And that actually, we're actually working with one of the largest districts in the Pacific Northwest because they wanted this model. And today we actually went live across the district with items that were written by teachers that they then can, because they're having problems with teachers believing that this is a process that's actually supposed to help them. And most teachers have gotten to a place where they're pretty skeptical about whether this kind of testing can help them. But if you grow it up from what teachers know, and then teachers hold each other kind of accountable, then that kind of accountability they can buy into. And so I won't name the district, but yeah, as of today, we're going live. And other kinds of models we've done with 400,000 kids across Texas. So there's a pattern-based approach that we can implement for free with teachers. There's other technologies you can use that we've already done in Texas with 400,000 kids. That was through the Texas Education Agency. I'm betting our 2 representatives are not aware of that. I can send the report that was prepared to Mike and sent to Mike Morath, who I've known for a while. That was built on this model of bottom up.
Please share that with representatives and also check with AFG as well.
Okay, you got it.
Thank you.
It has long sentences, the academic thing kicks in, and I don't know.
That's all right. We love it.
Teresa's read it, I think.
The information and standardized tests provide about a student are heavily impacted by factors outside the school. Just as, for example, if a physician was treating a patient, there are things that the patient is doing outside of the physician's office that the physician cannot control. This year, the pandemic will also be a challenge. In turn, we have TIA, and for those members of our audience who aren't familiar, TIA is the Teacher Incentive Allotment. It's been funded by HB3 in Texas, which reserves some merit pay for teachers whose students perform well on the STAAR test. Teachers and students are finding themselves having to perform in uncharted territory due to COVID, something that the current teacher evaluation systems weren't designed to account for. So our first question is, how do we ensure our educators are not being unfairly penalized for things outside of their control? And should teachers' performance be based on standardized tests in 2021 and moving forward? So that's a 3-part question. You will be graded on your answer. So I'll repeat that. How do we ensure?
There's something wrong with my computer. I can't answer it. Yeah.
So how do we ensure our educators are not being unfairly penalized for things outside of their control? That's first. So Representative Deaver, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree that with the pandemic, that issue is much larger than it would be in a normal year. But I would suggest that we have the issue even prior to the pandemic, that it's unfair for a teacher to be judged by the performance of a student who the teacher only sees maybe about 50 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year. And so that environment suggests that the teacher has actually very little total impact. When you look at the total work on the student, there are a lot of factors that impact that student besides the teacher. And so I don't think any of us would want to have our body of work judged by such a small, an item that we have such a small amount of influence on. And I'm not saying a teacher doesn't have a lot of influence, they do. I'm just saying they're one of many things that have an influence on that student. So I don't think it was fair, pandemic or no pandemic, I just don't believe it's fair to judge a teacher based on the performance of a student on a standardized test.
Dr. Trevino, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it really goes back to and this is kind of our resonating call this session on high stakes. That is the highest stake. You're basing someone's pay, a teacher's pay, on a student performance. That they have no control over. I mean, there are some things, but goodness, in the pandemic especially, there's so few things that teachers have control over. And I think it's wrong to do that, honestly. I don't think that that's the way to incentivize teachers. I think there are much more preferable ways to incentivize teachers that don't have to be based around a test score on a single day, sometime in April. I mean, getting back to the fact that there's a whole body of work that a student has that the teacher could show, hey, here's where I made interventions, here's where I was really helpful. And look, the student turned things around and now they understand this concept so much better. And again, I'm not a pedagogist, I'm not an educator, but but I grew up with one. My mother was a teacher for 41 years, so I got to hear a lot about,
By proxy.
By proxy, yes.
And then,
Well, this was a three-parter, and I must admit I
You're
haven't.
doing very well. So far, I'm going to 8 out of 10. You're hitting it out. You're knocking it out. Come on, Dr. T, you can do it.
But that's
something else about that accountability. These tests put the kids in the same order, and then if you decide you want to work with kids that are, underserved, then the tests consistently put the kids in the same order year after year. That's what this kind of profiling test type taking thing does. It has very little sensitivity what teachers do, but it's very sensitive to income level and first language and so on. What that means for teachers that are committed to working with all our kids, but the kids that may need more resources and support, that they're going to be consistently over and over again put backward in terms of their salary or in terms of their rewards, precisely because they're working with the kids that are struggling the most. Mm-hmm. So that's just, it reinforces the kind of inequalities that we're supposed to be addressing with No Child Left Behind.
Right. Right.
Can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
And maybe somewhat go off script, and that's always dangerous, I realize, but the thoughts came to me as we were discussing, the bottom-up test development and more involvement of the teacher in that process. And for me, as a former educator and now a legislator, the elephant in the room for me, every time I'm involved in these discussions, is it goes back to what seems to me to be a level of distrust of teachers among policymakers, and I don't understand that. I've been pushing since I've been in the House. Dr. Carino has been wonderful to work with us on trying to make some sense of the writing assessment and doing a portfolio writing assessment. And you would not believe the walls I have hit with that. And it goes back to, we can't allow a teacher to judge that portfolio. And they don't come out and say, because we don't trust them, but I mean, what other conclusion can you?
We're going to trust some vendor who hires somebody in the dark of night to scan through the essays to do it.
And we have testimony that, on the writing that they, in the past at least, have look for graders on Craigslist. I mean,
exactly. That's what I mean. It's like
you're hiring graders off Craigslist.
It's exactly what you're saying, is that we'd have a distrust of teachers, even though the teachers are the ones that are with the kid all the time. And like, why do we distrust? I think part of it, the scores have not gone up and so forth. And so I think the Chester Finns of the world are looking for somebody to blame. And so they look to blame teachers union. Why don't you look at the psychometrics and the tests themselves? It could be that. And not, they're looking for blames because it hasn't worked out as that's my speculation, Gary. I don't know. I basically agree with you. Why are we not trusting the professional educators?
And following up with Representative Van Deaver, we actually have some pretty good examples of what we could do instead of STAAR. We've got the International Baccalaureate System, which, granted, we don't have to do it to that scale. We don't have to send essays to Geneva to be graded. Surely,
that could make some folks in Texas
enough that we could, have either something within district or within ESCs. There's just got to be a way that we can do this to grade a student's body of work, graded by teachers who understand the curriculum that we're teaching and know what this student is doing and can look at this more holistically. There's portfolios that we've talked about, and yes, there's all these walls that were put. I mean, that was crazy what we were trying to do, Representative Van Deaver. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And again, I mean, I loved my English teacher through high school. In fact, I made sure I got her 2 years in a row because she was such a fantastic teacher and really taught me how to write and prepared me for college. Now, was I a college writer? No, I had to learn that. But that's the other thing. The expectation is to get them ready, not already, college proficient, but ready for that next step.
Right.
Yeah.
And ready for any college. Ready for everyone's not going to and should not go to UT.
Right.
We should be piloting these things in
The
Texas.
question is that there are estimates that I've seen estimates that the STAAR test costs anywhere between $73 million and $90 million a year annually to administer.
And that's just at the state level. That's not counting the unfunded mandates that districts must meet in order to give the test.
Exactly. And that's what I said, just to administer. So yeah, so if we're spending that kind of money, then who's really benefiting from STAAR? Who benefits most from STAAR then?
I know some people that live in London that are benefiting.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about that price tag, that money could be better invested in teachers and the resources that educators and school support staff need to really individualize instruction consistently without some new testing tool or technology that we've got to get used to every 2 years, because now there's the greatest thing has dropped. So I guess the question is who really is benefiting from STAAR? It doesn't sound like from our panel here that it really is. Teaching and learning doesn't seem to be benefiting.
Wouldn't it be great if at least this year and maybe next year we could take the millions of dollars that we're spending on the STAAR and invest that in trying to help these students close this gap?
Absolutely.
That we know we're going to have, that we know we have from COVID. Who could argue that that's not a good?
Could we pilot some assessments and some different approaches? The thing that bothers me is that we seem to have no belief that we can be creative or inventive or come up with ways of moving, both drawing on what we know, but moving forward. Like, can we invest some fraction of $90 million in exploring some things that have been brought up by Teresa and all of you know about, but because the contract is exclusive, it makes it hard for the agency to try out pilots, but we should be allowed by law, be allowed to pilot things. And we should be exploring them so they do exactly what you say, that we get some information about kids so that we can close the gaps. The STAAR test was never designed to do that. It's a high stakes accountability test. It wasn't designed to generate information about helping kids catch up. That's not what it's designed to do.
We're not going to test our way there. That's the important thing to understand here.
And it's not going to have superpowers that it didn't have beforehand. It doesn't have superpowers that it didn't have beforehand.
So I wanted to ask you all also, since STAAR is also used as part of accountability for school ratings and district ratings, those A through F ratings. So what have you been hearing, especially I wanted to hear from the representatives, what have you all been hearing from your constituents, about students and educators, the test, accountability? What's going on? What's happening in you all's districts?
For my district, what I'm hearing.
I'm not hearing very much. Mm-hmm.
Really?
No. I'm not hearing very much. I think they've gotten used to it, and they're not complaining anymore. But as far as I'm concerned, and you're right. I think who's benefiting from the testing? I think the vendors are. I think it's really a vendor move. And until we start thinking about where we are really spending our monies in education, that things will not change. As long as we have monies going out to vendors, things we could do in-house, as he said, do our own tests. Now, keep in mind, Texas made its own STAAR test. It did its own test with the input from teachers and principals, and I was there when it evolved, so I know that process. But I think what we need to do is kind of go back to the diagnostic test that we used to have. It focused on a student. This is what Mary learned this year. This is what Johnny learned this year. This is how much growth he made. It doesn't test, things that may or may not have been taught to him that year. So it's not fair to judge the students on it, and it's not fair to judge the teachers on it, especially this year in this pandemic situation. So I think that we ought to be a little bit lenient on the students and a lot lenient on the teachers, because their job has been twice as hard this year. Plus, you don't have teachers. You have so many teachers who are out. You don't have teachers who are there. I heard Ford Bean on TV the other day said that they were sending office personnel to the campuses to hold classes down. Now, you and I know that is a day loss. That's called babysitting. And so we need to put some money into hiring teachers, a teacher pay raise so we can keep teachers. Teachers are leaving the profession and nobody's coming into the profession. So we really do need to focus on making the job attractive. Teaching is a difficult job. It's a very difficult job, but it's a rewarding job. And I guess I'd like to say I stayed in it for 39 years. But the money is not attracting people anymore, and the education that you have to put in, you got to go 4 years. Then if you get a master's degree, that's another 2. You get a doctorate, you don't get rewarded for that. So I think we need to elevate the profession a little bit more by paying teachers too. Keep in mind, some teachers just get what the state pays. In some cities and counties and school districts, they just get what the state pays. I think the last time I heard it was $28,000. So can you imagine teachers going to school for 4 years and coming out with $28,000? So how much can you put into that job? You got to go get another job. Oh, I said all of that to say we have a lot to learn into making the job attractive and attracting people in.
There's a pipeline. I love it. Representative Van Deaver, you were going to say what's happening in your district.
Yeah, it's really been to me a very interesting phenomenon to watch, because when we went to the A through F, and by the way, I think the A through F is just a farce. It's not. It doesn't tell you really anything about a school district, in my opinion. But the educators were extremely upset, and I understand why. You're being graded, unfairly. Let's just leave it at that. It's just an unfair grading system. But it's been very interesting for me to watch, because, and we have, for the most part, schools that are C and above here, and a lot of B's and C's. But we have some, at the both extremes. The amazing thing to me is the parents and the local citizens believe in a local school district, and they don't believe that grade. They know their school system. They know their teachers. They know what their student is doing. They know how much better their student is this year than last year, and there's no substitute for that. And our schools in my area, for the most part, we're somewhat rural, and our schools are community-based schools. Our community, the school is the community in many cases, and so
yep.
We can tout this A through F system all day long, but for the parent and for the citizens in our districts, at least in my district, they just almost laugh at the A through F, because they know what their school district's doing.
Right.
Thank you for that. So we are actually wrapping up. We're close to closing time. Happy hour is almost over. So what I would love to hear from each of you is maybe a couple of closing remarks. Again, I want to thank all of our audience members and our panelists for being here. So if you want to have, just say anything to close us out and send us off on a weekend of so we don't have a STAAR hangover. Tell us your just some of your closing thoughts.
It's going to be really difficult to come up to the Capitol to advocate this year, but you need to use every means necessary to get to voice your opinions about the bills that are going to be passed, because it's going to be vitally important. Deaver and I are only 1 or 2 votes, and so your input is very important. So please don't drop the ball because the COVID is out there. You must give your information to us and to them, and don't forget, not only give it to us as representatives, you have to go all the way up to the governor's office where the bill stops. Okay, so don't forget that.
All right, audience, you have your marching orders from Representative Allen. Thank you, ma'am.
There you go.
Well, we would, well, I know for us as TAMSA and just still being involved with PTA, even now that my kids have graduated from college, it's still something that is very near and dear to me, is how we are educating and how we are treating our young students and our future workforce. And so what I would like to close with is, again, ask both Representative Deaver and Representative Allen to please consider filing a bill to remove the high stakes. And we'd love to see that moving forward. That would be one step. And secondly, whatever we can do to try to steer us gently and gracefully towards perhaps doing a waiver on the test this year, just as we did last year. We have sent 2 letters to the governor requesting that in the summer and again in the fall. But we'd sure like your help. And we can help support you. We can garner parents and community members to help you out in any way that we can to support bills that would support public education in just the way that both of you have described.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I filed the high stakes bill, but we need your input up all the way up the ladder.
Keep it going.
Yeah,
All right.
And you know, certainly haven't read the bill yet, but assuming that's what it does, I'll sign on to it. But you know, we do have some work to do, and although it's going to be a strange session and you know, unlike any session before, just because of the COVID situation, we have a lot of important work to do, and I hope we will stay focused, you know, keep our eye on the ball, and realize that you know, this is not a time to try to penalize teachers or students. This is a time to give them a hand up, and we do that by taking away the high stakes, you know, the high stakes accountability, and you know, and then I think this is a great opportunity to hit the pause button and say, where do we go from here? What are we going to do? You know, what does the future hold for us? And so I'm very optimistic. You asked for some words that would keep us from having a STAAR hangover. I don't know that I have those, but I can tell you I am optimistic. I believe in our schools. I believe in our teachers, our educators, and if we can just quit putting barriers in front of them and let them do their jobs and support them, the future has never been brighter for the state of Texas, in my opinion.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Dr. Stroup, take us out.
Because there's the pressure right now. I think looking at the COVID situation, it picks up on both representatives' thoughts is, you know, I think we've reminded ourselves how important school is.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've reminded ourselves how important it is, both from an intellectual but also emotional level, that Teresa talked about very early on, for kids to interact with each other and interact with their teachers. So it's been a horrific thing, COVID, but I think we're coming out the far side sort of saying what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And what really matters is teachers working with kids. And if we want to try get the wheels back on, we need to turn to the people that are closest to the kids. And so, yes, COVID has been horrific, but I think if we've stepped back and looked at assessment and said, this STAAR thing doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I also think we're stepping back and realizing that we need to support schools. Schools do things that you can't do on a computer like we're doing now, with the headphones facing the wall. And that I think there's a kind of revitalization that will come out from the far side if we pay attention to what matters.
Couldn't say it better myself. I haven't said it better myself.
I took your notes. I don't know if he has this feature. I was just stealing your notes.
I was writing down what you all were saying. I appreciate that. I want to thank each and every one of you sincerely. I really appreciate you all taking the time and sharing your thoughts. As an educator and as a member of AFT, it does invigorate me, makes me feel much better knowing that we do have, especially 2 former educators in our legislature who really do understand it and who are just grounded in common sense. And honestly, that really it does matter. It really does matter, because you can have all of the resources in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, So I really do appreciate that. I appreciate you, Dr. Trevino, for your advocacy, and Dr. Stroup as well. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here. We appreciate you. Godspeed to you all. Be safe in the coming, treacherous weather that's coming to Texas. Those of us who have moved here from the East Coast, don't want to be too dismissive, but we'll try to enjoy what little snow we might get. Have a wonderful happy hour if you all are going to go happy hour. Thank you again. We do appreciate all of your thoughts. And to all the educators out there, stay strong. All the parents out there, thank you for being our partners in education. Everybody have a great night. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.